Greshams Law, here we go again. Hello, everyone, and welcome to Insights, brought to you by Ainslie Bullion and the Gold and Silver Standard. Today, Alex Hutchinson is back from break and joining us. Welcome back, Alex. It's great to see you for another year of your valuable perspective.
Lovely to see you again, Chris. Happy 2023.
Yeah, happy 2023. So today's news piece that you put together was a very interesting piece about Gresham's Law, which is something that is historically relevant. And you really explained how it's been becoming increasingly relevant again today. So do you want to start off by just giving us a little bit of an overview of what Gresham's Law is?
Yeah, so Gresham's Law is a law that was coined, sort of started in around the 1500s, but it had been around for a long time. And it basically is that bad currency drives out good currency. So what that means is back in Roman times, in biblical times, so in Chinese dynasties, in every other dynasty, coins have always been a medium of trade. And those coins quite often were made of gold and silver. And Gresham's Law is based on eventually someone devalues it. So in 1544, Henry VIII, who was funding wars, decided to drop the amount of gold and silver in coins and started putting copper in it. So basically debased the currency to fund his extravagant lifestyle, his many wives and wars. And Gresham was the financier and the economist, I guess, was a consult to his daughter Elizabeth I, and coined the term that the bad currency has driven out the good currency.
Right. So that's there's a lot of historical precedents there, and I mean, this is only from my popular culture watching shows like Rome and things where the downfall of those civilizations was often when they started shaving off the amount of gold that was in the coins, wasn't it? Where they'd have to put the root sort of ribbing around the edges to make sure it was all there.
Yeah, and then you had in history sometimes someone just went, no, just throw some copper in there and don't tell anyone. See how long it lasts for, which is
that's the old bite down into it, isn't it? To check that it's the real deal. So if that was how it was back in that time, how is that sort of relevant today? What's going on that's making, or because I thought it was quite interesting how you're doing those parallels to where we are today and how that's relevant.
Well, I mean, we did that piece a while ago on Bretton Woods and the collapse of the US dollar gold reserve, basically. And at that point, there was high inflation through the 1970s as there was a scramble for some sort of replacement currency. So Kissinger then replaced it obviously with the petrodollar. So that stopped what was going on with the inflation when we came off the gold currency. So what it actually did was the petrodollar, which is not backed by anything, as we know, being the USD reserve currency, basically that bad currency, I guess, replaced the gold standard. So what that enabled thing to do is normally this prolonged period where you've got high inflation because of the debasement of currency, it doesn't normally last this long. So
no, because it doesn't, does it? Like if you look at those historically similar situations, they haven't lasted that long at all. Whereas this, we've had we're talking multiple decades now.
50 years.
That's a long time on that petrodollar standard.
That's right. But what was actually going on through the 1970s was you did have that inflation happening. Kissinger actually just extended it. And just like the 1970s, just like Henry VIII, the money was being used to fund wars. 1970s Vietnam War. Kissinger just enabled America to extend out this period where there was stability in the currency, but it's really now coming home to roost because not only do we, not have a gold standard, we literally have a currency backed by a petrodollar, which is a promise of support to Saudi Arabia. Like it's just insanity what's happened.
And do you think that that's changing a little bit now too? Because we've talked about it a few times, this idea of potentially the BRICS countries coming together and expanding their influence. It's something that's just playing in the back of my mind where we sort of work on this assumption that the petrodollar has to be the be all and end all because it always has been. But there really is a bit playing in the background around that, isn't there?
Well, I mean, we've spoken about the Petro One and what's going on in currency markets, but looking back historically and just what happened with Henry VIII in the period, which was actually known as the Great Debasement. So there was a period of 10 years where England fell off from being such a great superpower, where people didn't trust their money anymore. So traders, for international trade, were demanding payment in gold and wouldn't accept English currency. So in order to fix this, Elizabeth I then hired Gresham, I guess, as a consult and said, what do we do? And their answer was to fix the dollar. So they then took all of the debased currency out of circulation and put back in good currency again. And so whether it's a Petro One, it's gold, it's Bitcoin, or some variation of any of the above, the petrodollar has run its course. It's causing inflation, and it's now a bad currency causing problems. And something like what happened with Elizabeth I is going to have to give it either confidence again, or there's going to have to be something new.
So let's just expand on that idea a little bit. Do you think that this time is different? Like when you can make those historical comparisons, are we at that same point in history, like you've just alluded to? We sort of are at that point, but is there anything different this time around, or are we really destined to play out the same story again?
So I guess the difference is 1970s, after the Nixon took off the Bretton Woods Agreement, USD off. Gold standard, the US dollar started collapsing. Same thing. People had no faith in the currency. And it took Kissinger to say, right, we're going to do the petrodollar. The biggest difference there then is, the gold standard was running its course. The collapse of that dollar, like what happened under Henry VIII with the Great Debasement, it was running its course. There was high inflation. There was less faith. It has now been 50 years past that. So they've now managed to extend this another 50 years. And I guess the main reason they've been able to do that is because demographically, we've just had so many more people. The money can be spread out more.
Yep.
So you can debase a currency more and more between more and more people. But we are hitting population maximums, I guess, in a lot of Western worlds now. So that flexibility that's been there for 50 years is no longer there.
So if I'm summarizing what you're saying there correctly, we've had this period of time that's sort of given us the ability for something that should have happened. That Gresham Law scenario really should have happened much earlier, but due to demographic factors, due to the unique situation that unfolded over this last 50 years, that's what's kept us going in a system that really wasn't sustainable in the first place.
It seems to be the way. And, it's allowed America to have deficit after deficit. So forgetting wars and Vietnam wars, look at the overspend that they've been able to do year on year on year.
Yep.
So now, 32 trillion now, or approaching very quickly. It's insanity on a currency that is not backed by anything anymore.
Yep. So that's a pretty dire way to leave it. Is there any more to it? Where does that leave us? Like, do you think that what comes next is what came next in that Elizabethan era? Like, how do you see what comes next out of this?
It's not going to be that dire. The world goes on, trade goes on, but something's going to have to replace the current system. And it's not, whether that's a commodity-based currency. We've spoken obviously about all the world banks at the moment buying up gold. Mm-hmm. So, so
they might have a hint that they might be thinking along these same lines and be going, well, we need at least some insurance there.
Well, yeah, what is it? Who knows? But
it's
not what it is now, I guess. So, but I don't, you can be as dire as you want about the world, but the world's really a lovely place and it'll keep going. But
maybe we just think that because it's after holidays and it's the start of a new year. So we start off on an optimistic tone and see where we go from there. Is that how it is?
You sort of look back at all the other debasement sort of periods, and a lot of, it's resolved in 5-10 years.
Yep.
It's going to work itself out. The quantitative easing that's happened, that, has taken 25 years now. We're sort of still going where, or I guess, no, only 2008, isn't it? So 15, 16 years where we've continued to do it, but it was a solution.
Yep.
But the can has just been kicked further down the road with that as well.
So it sounds like we might need to still keep paying attention throughout this year to see what outcome it is, because we're not really saying that we know what it is. We just know that something's coming.
Something's coming. And if you look at what's going on with Bitcoin, I mean, that market's down, but it is a finite market. It's interesting. Maybe it'll be something like that. And you look at the central banks, they're buying gold. So maybe it's something along those lines.
More traditional, because they know that's the play they know how to do, isn't it?
Yeah, that is the one. That's the one that it's always fallen back on.
Yeah, great. Well, Alex, it's been great to catch up with you again. So thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you for having me again, Chris, and I'll see you next week.
Yes, absolutely. We really appreciate it. We look forward to you being back here every week. It really gives us something else to think about. You always take it in an interesting angle, so we appreciate that. And thanks to everyone for watching. So as always, if you have any comments or questions, we'd love to hear from you. So reach out on the socials, and we do see those and we do respond to those. So that's all from us for this week on Insights, but we'll be back again on Monday. And until then, take care.